Thank you, Russ, and welcome everyone. My name is Michelle Barnett, and I'm the president of the Jacksonville Bar Association in Jacksonville, Florida. I have the pleasure, if you want to call it this year, of leading the Jacksonville Bar, which is in the largest city geographically in the country. As you might expect, there are unique challenges to leading a bar association that is so geographically spread out. And so I've been very excited about the topic of today. Now more than ever, lawyers are essential. Just to give you all an overview of what to expect, we have two great speakers today, panelists, Robert Tobey and Joe Gross. Robert is the president of the Dallas Bar Association, and Joe is the president of the Cleveland Bar Association. We're going to hear from both of them individually about their experiences leading their bars through this process and given their respective sizes. And then we're going to move into some polling questions where we hope and would encourage all of you to participate in the polling questions, which will hopefully provide some opportunity to generate some additional discussion. At the end of both of their presentations, we're going to have a few minutes of a roundtable. I've got a few questions for both of them, and I suspect some of the audience might have questions for both of them. And so the goal of today is to learn from each other, have an opportunity to connect. Moving into our speakers, we're going to start with Robert. He's been involved in bar leadership for a really long time at all levels, and we're excited to have him today. Robert, I'm going to let you take over and tell us about your experience, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks, Joe. I think this is going to be a great program, and it's probably going to be a little bit cathartic for me just to be able to talk about the things that we've done this year. A lot of the past presidents have told me there's the year you plan for and then the year you get. And a bunch of them have said there's never been a year quite like this one. And it really was kind of an interesting start. We had a typical start to the year. I had my inaugural party in January, and it was one of those nights to remember, as they say. And we had our board retreat at the end of January in Austin, and ABA just a couple of weeks later in Austin. And then things started to change. And we have always been a very physical brick and mortar bar. We've got a building called the Below Mansion where we host section and committee meetings. We have over 400 CLEs a year, and we draw lawyers from all over the Dallas community to the Below for those meetings and events and other things. So on March the 12th, the world as we knew it ended. Everything else shut down just within a matter of hours and days. We shut down our Below Mansion. And my first thinking was, well, we're going to reopen on April 1st and everything will be just the way it had been before. It'll be great, and this will just be a blip. After about 3 or 4 days, I realized, this is the real deal, and we're in this for a long time. So the first thing we did was shift from what had been a very brick and mortar virtual, physical bar to a virtual bar. And I cannot credit our staff enough for the work that they put in to become experts in Zoom technology and starting programming within about 10 days of shutting down our building. And the other thing that we did right at the outset, about 4 days after we shut down, was form a coronavirus task force. So our task force, number one, started generating CLEs very rapidly. Number two, we started gathering resources from local, state, and federal authorities. We started dealing with wellness issues that in the early part of the pandemic, it became clear that people sheltering in place was going to be a huge problem from a mental distress and stress standpoint. And at this point, we've now got like a dozen things that we do under our COVID-19, we call it our coronavirus task force. So we've got a dozen categories of things. One of the things we did very quickly, because it was obvious that doctors and nurses and firefighters and EMTs were going to be on the front lines of the coronavirus battle. And we immediately started doing a program for first responders in terms of the wills and estate planning documents and having those available for first responders. Initially, we had a panel of lawyers available to ask questions in a phone bank. We then went to a more virtual platform with links to all the resources on the web. And that has been a huge success. In fact, in July, I got the numbers. We had almost 300 hits on the website for those resources. So obviously a very needed thing and something we were proud to jump up and do. The next thing chronologically was a call from Dean Collins at SMU Law School saying, we've got problems here. Our clerks are losing their opportunities. Firms are retrenching. We've got graduating 3Ls who are having their offers revoked. Huge problem. Reminiscent very much of 2008. And what we did was we formed a committee within about a month. We're calling it the STEER Committee, Stability Tools for Employment and Economic Resilience. And what we've done with that program is we have partnered seasoned lawyers, and we've got more than 20 seasoned lawyers in the program, with not only law students, but also young lawyers who have expressed a concern about their job stability to us. And what we're doing primarily is letting them know, this is awful. I mean, this is 2008 type awful, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. The lawyers who are the seasoned category, they've all seen it before. We've helped direct them to new employment opportunities because for every disaster in one area of the law, there's opportunities created in bankruptcy or employment, or even to some degree oil and gas, which has suffered a huge downturn at the same time as the COVID-19 pandemic hit. So that's been a big success so far. Another area where there's just been a tremendous need from the community, and we're trying to meet it. The third area I want to talk about is, again, but every time you start to think you've got a handle on this, something happens and something unexpected happens. So the next thing that happened was George Floyd. And for me, George Floyd changed everything. I mean, it was one of these things where I didn't come into my year thinking I was going to be focused in on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging issues, but I decided in the wake of George Floyd and the reaction to George Floyd that that's where my focus needed to be for the rest of my term through December 31. So what we've done is we have formed something we call the Allied Dallas Bars Equality Task Force. And the Allied Dallas Bars part, meaning it's the Dallas Bar plus all of the sister bars. The group of the task force really wanted to be broader than just an anti-racism platform. And so as we speak, we're actually kind of working on our call to action. We've got 52 separate items that we're looking at and trying to decide which of these can the task force do itself, which of these can we do if we partner with somebody in the community, and which of these are probably aspirational for now. They're just they're either too big or there's just too many moving parts to it to put it in place anytime soon. And we are partnering in the community. There's a group called Project Unity in Dallas that has facilitated what we call Together We Dine, which is a program designed to get people together where you eat and you discuss issues of race. And these conversations are frank. They can be candidly uncomfortable, but they're important and you learn. And what we're doing now is we're setting up a new program called Together We Can. And the virtue of Together We Can is not only are we having the Together We Dine gatherings, but we're taking this process into the community and having people engage with those who are not of a like mind and try to build understanding between people with different viewpoints. And I'm not so naive to think we can solve the problems of racism and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the rest of my term through December 31, or even in the years to come, or maybe even in my lifetime. But one thing we've decided is we're going to start and we're going to make a persistent effort and a consistent effort to make a difference. And if, as much as anything else, I hope that becomes our legacy from the events of COVID-19, is that we went out in the community and tried to make a difference and tried to make this country a better place. So with that, I'll turn it back to Michelle and let her cue up Joe.
Robert, thank you. Great ideas, great feedback, certainly some innovative things that we can certainly take back. I've written down lots of notes and have some follow-up questions for you about some of those great ideas you all have developed. We're going to move into some questions at this time, some polling questions that'll come up on your screen. And so we're going to have them pop up, and if you'll be prepared to respond to them, we'll give everybody a moment to transition to those polling questions.